All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have been through respiration, so this photosynthesis thing is going to seem like a piece of cake. Let's do it. All right, guys, in photosynthesis, what we're doing is we're taking sunlight and we're using that energy to build ourselves some sugar, or specifically some glucose. And if you've seen respiration, then this is just basically respiration in reverse. So here is our chemical formula or equation for photosynthesis. We take water and carbon dioxide, then we use the energy from the sun to make glucose and oxygen as a byproduct, or waste product in this case. But for us, that oxygen waste product is great news. Okay, so what's going on here is the sun's energy is knocking off high energy electrons, which can then be harnessed in the building of carbon dioxide into glucose. So it's pretty cool. We can take something really simple with one carbon and convert it into something with 6 carbons that can be used for energy. The only organisms that do this are what are called autotrophs. Autotroph means self-feeder, so they're also known as producers, so things like plants and photosynthetic bacteria. And this occurs in the chloroplast. So animals don't do this. Here's a plant cell over here, and one of the unique organelles to the plant cell was the chloroplast, and this is a blown-up view of it right here. So that's the organelle that's going to be doing this photosynthesis thing. By the way, if we break down the word photosynthesis, photo means light, synthesis means to make. So it's using light to make something, in this case, food. Alright, so here's a very generic plant, and our very generic plant is going to do some photosynthesis for us. So its roots are going to bring in, its leaves are going to bring in carbon dioxide first. So they're going to bring in carbon dioxide from the air. That could be carbon dioxide breathed out by animals. It's going to bring in water through the roots, and that carbon dioxide and water are then going to combine through the power of sunlight to form our products of photosynthesis. So the inputs are sunlight, CO2, and water. The outputs are going to be the glucose, which the plant is mostly going to store in the roots and for use for later. And the other output is oxygen gas, which is released by the plant into the atmosphere. And that's what we are then going to use to conduct respiration to create more carbon dioxide and water. And so the cycle just continues and continues. All right, let's take a look at the chloroplast, which I refer to as the solar panel of the cell. The chloroplast is kind of a complex little structure, so let's take a look at each part. All right, there are these little pancake-like flattened disc inside a chloroplast, and those are called the thylakoids. And the thylakoids are really, really important for photosynthesis because they are the things that contain the chlorophyll, which is the green pigment that the plant cell or the chloroplast uses to harness energy from the light. Connecting one thylakoid to another thylakoid are these little tubes called lamella, and multiple thylakoids stacked together create what's called grana, or a singular stack is called a granum. Now, all of these things are bound and floating around in a fluid called the stroma, and the stroma is also very important for photosynthesis because one of the main stages of photosynthesis occurs there. And then all of this is held together by 2 different membranes, the inner membrane and the outer membrane. Alright, so this is the organelle that actually does the photosynthesis. So again, the inputs would be carbon dioxide and water with a little bit of sunlight, and this chloroplast is then going to kick out glucose for storage in food and oxygen, which it'll release out into the atmosphere. Alright, unlike respiration, which has 3 stages, photosynthesis only has 2 main stages. The first stage is called the light-dependent reactions, sometimes just referred to as the light reactions. And the second stage is the light-independent reactions, which means that this stage doesn't actually require light. It's also known as the dark reactions, even though this happens during daylight hours, and it's also known as the Calvin cycle. So we got lots of different names for stage 2, so if you hear any of those, light-independent, dark, or Calvin, they're all referring to the same stage. Okay, these occur in the chloroplast. The light-dependent reactions are in the thylakoids, or the grana, or the big stacks of thylakoids, and the light-independent happens out here in the stroma. All right, this is our kind of overall picture of photosynthesis and what's going on. So this green blob right here represents our chloroplast, and we're going to specifically focus on just the thylakoids, or a granum right here. And this over here represents what's going on in the stroma, what's known as the Calvin cycle. All right, so let's start with the light-dependent reactions, the ones that require light. So in the light-dependent reaction, water moves into the thylakoids, and light bombards the chlorophyll in those thylakoids, releasing some electrons. In the process, that water is split and oxygen is released as a waste product. But in the splitting of, in that light, those gathering of electrons, it's used to create two different energy molecules. Those energy molecules are something called NADPH, not to be confused with NADH, which we saw in respiration, and ATP, which we're very familiar with. And that NADH and ATP then move out of the thylakoids into the stroma, where they enter into this series of chemical reactions called the Calvin cycle, or the light-independent reactions. Okay? These reactions are then powered by these two different energy molecules that are created. At this point, carbon dioxide diffuses into the chloroplast, where it is built into, ultimately, while being powered by these energy molecules, into glucose. And that is the product that the plant is trying to create. That is the food. So when we eat plants, especially roots, we are eating the glucose they created. Now, these energy molecules are spent in the process of converting this CO2 into glucose, and so they are kicked back out as sort of the lower battery version, the lower energy version. So ATP is converted into ADP and phosphate, which go back into the light-dependent reactions, and NADPH is turned into NADP+, which is kicked back into the thylakoids, where light comes back in, recharges those molecules, and sends them back into the Calvin cycle again. So this process repeats itself over and over, and it's all powered by this light coming in from the sun.